Welcome back. Looking for my opponent for round 3 in MTGO Competitive League. I am on Noble Sultai, a deck I brewed with the intent of combating unfair graveyard decks, as well as control decks and Tron. So far we've been paired against aggro twice, and we're 1-1, which is to be expected because it's not what this deck was built to combat. Noble Hierarch is used here in this deck to leverage extra Scavenging Ooze mana turn 2. So you can exile a graveyard, something from someone's graveyard, turn 2. Or you can drop a Liliana, one of the 6 that's in the deck, the main board, on turn 2 with the help of the Blooming Marsh mana base. And Lilianas on turn 2 are very, very good against control decks. They generally have their shields down for the first turn or two. And their plan is to use a spot removal Path to Exile or a board wipe to handle creature threats, and then to ferry and Cryptic Command, maybe even a Detention Sphere to handle everything else. His hand's alright. Certainly not my favorite. Okay. Watery Grave tapped makes me think it's a control deck. Death Shadow decks would usually shock there. So we might be seeing Grixis control. If that's the case, I'll just run out Scavenging Ooze into some sort of removal spell. Hopefully counter magic to help me land Liliana. Okay, so also could be Goryo's Vengeance. In that case, Scavenging Ooze, a little blind, might not have been the right play, but if I get to untap with them, I'll be doing very well. In fact, my opponent probably knows that and is probably looking for a fatal push to take care of the Skoos right now. Yep, this is definitely some sort of graveyard enabler and probably Grishoalbrand. I chose to play the Polluted Delta because I can always snap in, flash in Snapcaster Mage as an extra damage enabler. Not too worried. I would definitely exile the Faithless Looting if there were only one of them. Knowing there's 2, I'd have to spend both mana to exile those and then only hold up 1 mana. I don't like that plan. I'd rather just give my opponent the Faithless Looting and try to exile the spell that actually matters. This is a deck I feel much more comfortable playing against when I am Sultai as opposed to when I'm Abzan. My options here are I can play Tarmogoyf and hold up 1 green mana, or I can keep my opponent on a slightly slower clock and exile that Faithless Looting and hold up more green mana, which is what I would prefer to do. This way I also hold up Fatal Push or Abrupt Decay in case they have Jace, Looter Jace, Flip Jace, Looter Jace, what's he called? Whichever. Okay, so this is also a Through the Breach deck. Sure. So my options are, right now, Abrupt Decay the Simian Spirit Guide, untap, swing in for 4, with plenty of green mana to start eating, or plan on, eat some things, plan on casting Liliana, edicting the Spirit Guide, and going from there. I think I just like moving it now and seeing what I draw. Now I have a 2-turn clock on my opponent, and that is without dropping Tarmogoyf, which I do not want to do. Dropping Tarmogoyf would keep me having only 1 green mana up, which means if they discarded a Grishoalbrand, they, in response to me trying to eat it, could resurrect it, or in response to me trying to eat it in response to the resurrection, they could cast another resurrection spell. So I'd rather have always 2 green mana up if I can, especially since playing Tarmogoyf does not increase my clock at all at this point. Okay, my opponent likes the cards on top of their deck. Unless they have a Spell Pierce, I think I have Lethal here. Okay, so my opponent was forced to sacrifice a Simian Spirit Guide, and then I was able to swing in, like I said, with the 5 lethal damage. Alternate line, I could have just Maelstrom Pulse the Simian Spirit Guide, but Liliana is usually just better to get in play anyway. So we are up a game on, looks like Grishoalbrand, cards that are absolutely coming in, Nihil Spellbomb, possibly Kalitas. Surgical Extraction, which is it's a card that pairs really well with Snapcaster Mage. Turn 2, I am able to Surgical Extract something, Snapcaster Mage, Surgical Extract something, which can be pretty crippling to graveyard-based decks. I didn't see any Jace, so Fatal Push isn't great. I know Abrupt Decay was really good in that match, killing a Simian Spirit Guide. That's not how my opponent's deck is designed to work, so that isn't great. Liliana the Veil and Liliana the Last Hope, which again, I've cultivated this deck around, aren't as powerful in this particular matchup. Neither is Dismember. If there were Esper, I might worry about the Esper 5/5 Spirit. Might want Dismember for that, but they're Grixis, which means they're red for the Faithless Looting instead of white for the Lingering Souls. Collective Brutality seems very good. There's an extra discard spell. Countersquall is a great way to slow down what they're doing. And if they are in the Breach plan, which I think they are because I saw the Mana Accelerant, I think Disdainful Stroke is very powerful here. I might even want to bring in another and trim some Lilianas. Something I don't hate is bringing in Fulminator Mage in matchups where they need to hit a certain amount of mana. If I can shut down their graveyard, which I did pretty well that game, their best out is beat me with his Through the Breach, and that does require an expenditure of mana. So a couple Fulminator Mages could help out in that regard. I think this is good. Kalitas isn't great here, but he's certainly better than Fatal Push in this matchup. So this hand is wonderful. I have the opportunity to go turn 1 Inquisition and then Surgical Extract something, and then Fatal Push to Surgical Extract something again. This is a pretty good hand. Did I say Fatal Push? Snapcaster Mage. Then I can Snapcaster Mage. Get Fatal Push on the brain. Everyone's excited about Assassin's Trophy, but Fatal Push is still the card that makes this deck go. They may have brought in some form of Blood Moon against me. I'm not sure. So fetching a basic's never really a bad thing. My options here are Collective Brutality, get rid of the Manamorphose, which I'm not too worried about color fixing my opponent. I could hold up Snap for Snap Surgical, or I can just play a threat and hold up Surgical Extraction to stop any shenanigans. It's a great word, shenanigans. I feel like everyone knows what it means, but doesn't really know what it means. I have no idea what it means, but I know what it means. My opponent didn't have a great hand. They were really light on enablers, but heavy on threats. They need to draw into ways of spitting out one of these threats or getting them in the graveyard. There's one of the enablers they were digging for. Okay, they have Simian Spirit Guide and World Spine Worm. Don't like how MTGO doesn't put this in the revealed zone, but it makes sense because otherwise they would be revealing the entire library as well. Okay, I was right. Through the Breach. Leyline of the Void. Probably is a way to combat Traverse, Tarmogoyf, Snapcaster. So, threats my opponent has remaining. Borigamos, World Spine Worm, which they can still Through the Breach. And that'd be pretty devastating, especially since it has Trample and they leave the 3/5/5 worms behind. I don't have an answer for that. I don't really see any other way I can die, so now I'm just have to worry about my opponent drawing a Through the Breach and with that World Spine Worm. Now they can get rid of a Snapcaster Mage, but I still have another one, which is nice. So I can still Snap Surgical. And if I'm able to get rid of the World Spine Worm, for example, if I draw Thoughtseize, that would be a really, really fun play. Knowing my opponent's hand, I don't want a Brutality, so I'll just swing for 5. So my opponent's outs are still Nourishing Shoal, World Spine Worm, and Through the Breach. Borigamos, however you pronounce that, isn't as much of a threat without Grishoalbrand. If my opponent draws a Through the Breach, I'm dead. Game plan now is to somehow find a way to crack a clue, or let's see. Okay, my opponent should be dead. I have 7 damage here, 8, 9. I know the last card in their hand, so I can escalate to drain 2 and to kill a creature. And there's 7 damage. Tireless Tracker plus Collective Brutality sped up my clock by 1 turn. So I am now 2-1. You didn't really get to see too many of the sideboard cards, although Surgical was pretty nice, especially knowing with 3 copies of Snapcaster Mage, you functionally have more. My opponent did stumble a bit early in that, but that's his magic. Sometimes I stumble, my opponents win too. So now 2-1, and looking into hopefully 4-1ing this league. Gotta win the next one first though. I will see you then.